This is Rocky Snyder. At the tone, leave your name and message and I'll get back to you.
Acupuncture! That's right, as part of our ongoing expansion, we've moved into the area of dietary control through acupuncture.
So you are a trained acupuncturist?
Yes, self-taught.
Well, welcome back to the RockFit Files. I'm Rocky Snyder, and we are continuing our series with The Successful Body, which is this book right here that happens to have a whole bunch of world-class experts in health, fitness, wellness, mindfulness, public speaking. There's 33 experts that have been contributing to that book, each a chapter. And fortunately for myself, I was asked to be one of them. And so is my next guest, Robert Prokop. Now, Robert is a licensed acupuncturist. He works in Baltimore, Maryland, and delves into all aspects of traditional Chinese medicine and more, helping to integrate that philosophy and approach that is thousands of years old into our new society, which is only a few hundred. So, and it has a tendency, the American ways and Western worlds, to be a little bit slow on the uptake. So he's one of the ones in the front edge that's helping to integrate such philosophies into our world. Now, before we bring him on, this is your opportunity to actually get a complimentary copy of The Successful Body by going to Instagram and following us at Rocky_Snyder. And that's the Instagram channel or place to go to follow. And this week, I will draw a name from the hat of followers, and it would help if you put Successful Body as a message, and then I'll select one and I'll contact you and send your copy your way. So Robert, hey, welcome to the RockFit Files. It's great to have you on.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here.
Now, you've been an acupuncturist for how long?
5 years.
Wonderful. Now, there's here in Santa Cruz where I am, we have 5 branches acupuncture school. And it's fairly well known, I would say, with a great faculty. Where is it that you went and got your license for acupuncture?
I got licensed through Maryland University of Integrative Health in Columbia, Maryland.
Oh, and this is a 4-year accredited institution. And aside from just acupuncture.
Yeah, it's a master's degree. With an optional to do a doctorate, which I haven't pursued yet. It's another year.
And how does it work in the state of Maryland? Just I'm curious, because California law has a certain way of licensing and dealing with acupuncture. How does it work in Maryland?
Yeah, California is a very different state compared to the rest of them. There's a national acupuncture board, the NCCAOM, and each state kind of has different requirements through the NCCAOM based on different testing and stuff like that. So every state kind of has its own flavor of how many tests you need to pass, or if the state itself has a specific exam. Maryland is unique in that it actually doesn't require any of the national board exams. Once you get your master's degree, you can get licensed.
Oh, I see. All right. So it just proves that you've been through a lengthy accredited program, and then you can start your practice there. So do you have a private practice or do you work in a clinic? How is that for you?
Yeah, I'm a general practitioner. I have a private practice called Windgate Wellness, and I started that pretty much right out of school back in 2016. And so I've been running that ever since. I've worked in a few different capacities. I managed a community clinic for a while, which is kind of walk-in style acupuncture. That's a little bit more affordable. You're in a group room with other people, and the treatments are they're a little less complex treatments since you don't have as much time to do intake and work with that.
Gotcha. So it's community tables. You go in and honestly, you just feel the pulses and put needles in, and it's almost like speed dating in a way.
Yeah, and they would actually just be in recliners, and we just work on arms and legs, head and face stuff. Obviously not after COVID.
Yeah. But the majority of people that come through on a regular basis and get treatment, and it's kind of like I won't say one-stop shopping, but it's a regular pattern that they're doing. They're not coming in specifically to address an issue and then they're gone for a while until something else pops up. This is almost preventative maintenance for them.
Yeah, some people use it that way. I definitely have a number of patients who show up out of the blue every 4 months, get a few treatments, then disappear. So everyone kind of uses it differently, which is kind of the beauty of the medicine, is it's so individualized that you can kind of build your own regimen. Obviously, I recommend people do it regularly, kind of as preventative care, but there's no harm in going for seasonal tune-ups either.
That's good. Now, with a lot of people who pursue a certain career path, especially within health, fitness, and wellness, they have had previous experience themselves because they were dealing with some issues in their own self and they received tremendous benefit from a certain approach, and that inspired them to look at it further. And then before you know it, they've become a psychotherapist or a massage therapist or who knows, personal trainer. What's your background, and how did you come to learn and study and perform traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture?
It started when I was 19. I had a lot of anxiety, just generalized. So I actually sought out hypnosis for it, and that was really successful. So at 19, I ended up going and becoming a consulting hypnotist. And from there, I started getting into contemplative psychology, Buddhist psychology, and I actually moved to Boulder to go to Naropa University. And there I took courses in five element psychology, which is five elements being more of a like Chinese medicine approach to working with the emotions. And so
Sure.
from there, I just kind of naturally gravitated towards that.
Wow. So five elements. You're gonna. This is like a test for me here, but I'm gonna try and list them for you. But it's water, fire, wood, metal, and earth. Or did I get it right?
Yep.
All right. Cool. So I'm curious. You've piqued my interest in five element psychology. I have never heard of such a thing. What's that all about?
Yeah, the five element school of thought, it's a relatively newer model of acupuncture and Chinese medicine that's kind of based off of some older texts. So Chinese medicine's always just kind of evolving and transforming throughout the ages. But five elements does a lot of work with the directionality of the emotions throughout the body. So for instance, like anger has kind of a rising chi quality. And so that kind of gets categorized into the wood element. Wood element, the movement of chi within wood is springtime. So you see things rising out of the ground. You see like new growth rising out of trees. So it's all these different manifestations of nature as they're moving through us within the emotions.
I see. Okay. So it isn't like, say, what enneagrams or personality types per se. It's not like because you are primarily wood, therefore we're going to deal with your psychological profile as that category. It's not like that.
It has a little bit of that. I think as you're working with people, you see all five of these elements showing up so fully. Usually, when somebody is really presenting with a lot of one element, it's usually out of balance and kind of reaching out. So no way, we don't really box people into a single elemental category, but I will
Got it.
definitely use a certain element that's really prominently showing up as a kind of guideline as to where I'm going to start treating.
Okay, well, I'm curious now. Say that somebody is a little bit more present or showing more symptoms, I guess you'd say, in the wood category. Does that carry over into their personality? You ever notice that with the people that you're treating?
Oh yeah, and I think wood is probably the easiest example to give people because wood is this. It's fast, it's rising. Um, people who are wood will kind of have like a punchiness to their talking and a little more shout to their voice.
What are you
And
trying to say? What are you really? Are you just pointing fingers at me right now?
um, and yeah, it's interesting to see. A lot of times wood can show up as frustration or anger if the chi isn't smoothly flowing through the body, it can show up as like a kind of a tension. So people will get tension headaches. That rising chi can kind of get stuck in the upper area, shoulder pain. So it immediately translates over to the body. So it's kind of just a spectrum of body and mind working in tandem.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So you speak in terms that are not common in Western medicine and Western philosophy. And oftentimes the unknown is ridiculed or prejudices are placed upon it because of ignorance or a lack thereof knowledge or education. So when you use words like chi, I don't have any particular issue with it because I understand that we are energy, and whether we call it chemical, electrical energy, chi, uh, whatever you'd like to call it, chakra centers, I am completely okay with it. But there's many others that may not be. How do you communicate such information to people not so much skeptical that just may not have the information about traditional Chinese medicine that you do?
I usually just start with kind of a description of what I'm doing exactly. We really use qi. It's a palpable physical substance that we're actually measuring. How it's moving in the body. Is it stuck? Is it deficient? And we're evaluating body fluids and blood as well along that same line. And so I start just by kind of describing that qi is a tangible substance that we're measuring. And in Chinese medicine, especially in the East, qi is assumed whenever starting with any kind of medical treatment. So Western and Eastern medicine are really combined really well and integrated in China, for instance.
And why isn't it happening here as well as it is in China?
Oh, I think it really is. I think acupuncture for a long time was kind of lumped into a fringe category um, with some of like the more new age stuff. And I think really with the internet, with really Michael Phelps getting cupping, stuff like that, making it more prominent in kind of mainstream culture rather than there's this old man with giant needles in a 50s film. I think, and a lot of what we're doing in the acupuncture field is working in a more integrative setting with other physicians, Western medical professionals. So I think we're really doing the work and putting in the time to show people that we're not just this kind of fringe medicine, that we actually are an integrative system.
Yeah, and that is showing. Obviously, it's not like everyone's thinking it's voodoo. I mean, maybe in the outer reaches of society, they still hold on to such concepts. But on, like you mentioned, Michael Phelps, but the New England Journal of Medicine, I think it was probably between 8 to 10 years ago, came out with a position statement on acupuncture, noticing that there's obviously validity and efficacy with the approach, which was huge at the time that it came out. But now we've got athletic trainers on major league teams doing dry needling, and the cupping has become huge within the world of not only athletic training, but physical therapy. And cupping, well, why don't you explain what cupping is to the listening audience if they're not familiar with it, and then we can talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, it's basically putting suction cups on the surface of the body. And in Chinese medicine, we're using the suction cups to actually pull stagnation that might be in the muscles or the channels up to the surface.
And when you
So
say stagnation, what do you mean by stagnation?
typically, in a very like kind of rudimentary way to explain it, whenever you have pain in Chinese medicine, there's something stuck. So there's something stagnant somewhere. It could be blood, it could be qi, could be fluids are accumulating. So the cupping is a great way where if you go to a massage therapist, they'll work out the knot, they'll work out the stagnation to the kind of lymphatic system. The cupping's kind of a reverse massage where it's actually pulling it up to the surface rather than kneading it.
So when it comes to things like dry needling and cupping and other elements of traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture, Westerners have seemed to be just taking these things and honestly just stuck a flag in that territory, claiming it for themselves without really appreciating the background to it. What's your take on that, Robert?
Yeah, I mean, particularly dry needling, I really view as really professional plagiarism. They're using our tools, our acupuncture points, our acupuncture techniques that have been around for 5,000 years, and now they're saying it's a completely new modality that they invented and that has scientific research behind it, which is just crazy to me. And I think it really does a huge disservice to actual acupuncturists who are trained in this modality, who have master's degrees and doctorate degrees, who have actually studied these texts from 5,000 years ago and understand how acupuncture is supposed to work. And I think part of it might be for billing purposes. I mean, why send somebody to an acupuncturist if you could just put a needle in them and bill for it yourself? So it's kind of cutting out the middleman a little bit as well.
And
Maybe not so malicious, but
well, do you also think that maybe because they're skimming over the understanding of it, that there is a higher likelihood that um, that the outcome would not be as positive as it would be with somebody that is formally trained with it?
yeah, I mean, I think what I do whenever I'm treating a sports medicine condition is, you're definitely working on trigger points, or as they're calling them, trigger points or local points. And you're needling into the muscle, you're releasing those fibers and everything, but we're also working with the channel systems. So we're actually clearing that injury or that stagnation from the body rather than just kind of hammering away at it with needles. Um, and I think what they're doing is also really, I mean, it's just not really that, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Robust, I suppose, if you're just sticking needles into an injury versus it's very painful for people, first off, when they get dry needling. So versus
Gotcha.
what we're doing is kind of finding exact points on the body. We're using much thinner needles and we're doing it much more elegantly, so to speak. I mean, I really do feel like it's also kind of whitewashing acupuncture, taking it and making it a Western thing, calling it by a different name rather than honoring kind of the tradition and the title of qi or the title of acupuncture. And I've even heard physical therapists describe dry needling as acupuncture with science. And I think that's just it's so confusing, I think, for patients because I'll have patients who come in and tell me, "Oh, I got acupuncture from my physical therapist, and it was really painful and this and that." And I'm thinking, well, they're not actually an acupuncturist. You got dry needling. And so it's always a conversation I have to have. And even if I don't think physical therapists are saying they're doing acupuncture, but I think it's so similar because it is technically acupuncture that they're doing. I think it confuses people from like kind of an outside perspective.
Isn't that the American way? Taking something from somewhere else and bastardizing it to their own liking? Like whether it's yoga and now you've got all these California fusion classes where you have to heat it up to the temperature of the sun or you drop it into a deep freeze or whatever it is. It's no surprise to me, I guess, especially being out here on the West Coast, that we see this infusion of world philosophies and then they get twisted or not necessarily tramped on, but trampled on, but used in a way that may not have been initially intended. So with with your treatment though, you stick to a traditional sense. And tell me this though, acupuncture is the application of needles and traditional Chinese medicine is the underlying foundation where acupuncture is just one of the approaches. Is that an accurate way of thinking about it?
Yeah, totally. Chinese medicine really encompasses body work. Chinese herbal medicine is another large component if you're working in more of a medical sense or working as a general practitioner, the herbs are a really important component to that.
And so with the herbs, how is that how is that handled through not your practice so much as like the state of Baltimore? Are there regulatory boards, commissions, or protocol when dealing with such things?
Yeah, I think it's based state by state. In Maryland, we are with an acupuncture license, you are able to prescribe herbal formulas. I think other states, some require specific board exams to be taken in Chinese herbal medicine. I think some might not even allow acupuncturists. I'm not positive on that though.
No problem. Okay, well, I want to turn our attention to the book that you and I were hornswoggled into helping out. No, I'm just kidding. Where it was a treat to participate with this, with the successful body. Which, by the way, if you didn't listen to the beginning of the podcast, if you follow us on Instagram, Rocky_Snyder, and this week I'll draw somebody out that's a new follower, and that person will get a copy of the successful body. I'll just contact you and find out mailing information. But how did you get involved with the successful body, and can you tell us a little bit more about your part in it and what you wrote in your chapter?
Yeah, I just heard through the grapevine that Eric was looking for another author kind of last minute. I guess somebody dropped out last minute.
Mhm.
And so I reached out and said, "Hey, I can do a chapter." And he basically said, "Great, we're gonna need it within a week." So I put it together, got it edited by a friend and editor of mine, or a friend of mine who's also an editor, and that was that.
And what did you write about? What are some of the points that you want to get across to the reader?
I really wanted it to be not necessarily introductory, but I wanted some of the language to get clarified around Chinese medicine. So I really started with kind of a basic description of qi and the movement of yin and yang, and showing how it's all kind of a movement that circulates through nature, that circulates through our bodies. And so really I wanted to highlight or emphasize the amount that our bodies are really working in tandem with the elements outside, with the seasons and the changes in the planet.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, we've got things like seasonal affective disorder, and eh, we've noticed that there's higher levels of depression in the rainier parts of our nation and so on. But what is it that you're saying that the human form is connected to, of course, natural cycles of life? But can you give examples of that?
Yeah, I mean, Chinese medicine really started 5,000 years ago as an agricultural society's medicine. So these were people living out really in the harsh elements and heavy rains and high winds and, really hot, boggy conditions, all kinds of different arid climates. So it really developed from seeing, oh, these people in this rainier area have a lot of these kinds of issues. And so let's figure out how to treat that. So it could be a lot of like dampness issues or cold issues versus someone in a desert region, which might have a lot of kind of dry, arid issues. And then it's also kind of moving out from that point of view and looking at, oh, in this season, people tend to get this problem. In this season, people tend to get this. So it really started there. And I think to really practice Chinese medicine, you have to also look at what's going on outside.
In what regard? I'm curious about that. When you look outside and you see the weather, what are you expecting, or do you not to have expectations? But what are your observations?
Yeah, I mean, a good example is arthritis. People come in a lot in the winter, especially on a cold or damp day, and their arthritis is acting up. And that's kind of a sign that there's this cold dampness occurring in the joints. So
Mhm.
whenever I have a bunch of patients, it's really interesting. Some days I'll have three people come in a row and all like point to their neck and shoulders right here and say, I don't know what's going on. And it could be a super windy spring day with a lot of fluctuating temperatures. So it's always good to just pay attention, in my point of view, to see what's going on outside, and that will indicate how you're going to work on treating that condition.
I love it. And Well, in my approach too, with movement and so on, I've often considered the the protective bony surfaces, the yang, and the soft, kind of moist, uh, how would I say it, vulnerable places to be the yin, whether it's the gut, the front of your throat, the armpit, the pit of the elbow, the groin, behind the knee. Those are places that are very vulnerable, and there's a lot of soft tissue and circulation going on there. And on the opposite side are the bony structures, the outside of the knee and the outside of the elbow, some of the hardest parts of the body, and the back and the neck, and so on. So you spoke of yin and yang, but and I know that that's kind of part of it, but what else are we talking about when we think about that balance between the feminine and masculine, or the yin and the yang?
Well, we're looking at the yin and the yang of each of the organs. Is the heart yin out of balance? Is the liver yang rising? Is the gallbladder yin deficient? We're looking at kind of these like dichotomies within each of the systems. And definitely different parts of the body are more yin or yang. The whole front is more yin. Yin is all about receiving. So this is what we're taking in the world with, is our sensory organs. And yang is all about momentum and movement. So it's about, moving forward into the world from behind. It's this motive force. And you can even look in the organs, the yin is more of the flesh of the organs, and the yang is more of the activity or the, task of the organ.
I've never heard it described like that. That's great. Now, but when you mention organs, though, with traditional Chinese medicine, it's a little bit different, or maybe that's just the name of the channels that's different. But when you speak of the spleen, is it the same kind of spleen that we're talking about with the Western world?
Yeah, I would say from a Western perspective, it's more like kind of spleen pancreas. So some of the language is, translated from these older systems. So it's a little bit hard to fully like flesh out what like the spleen is without going into a really long conversation. So, but ultimately we're looking at, so spleen chi, for instance, um, people who are spleen chi deficient might feel cold, they might feel sluggish, they might have a lot of water retention or edema, have loose stools. So we're looking at just kind of these groups of symptoms as different patterns of different organ systems. And that could be that the spleen channel isn't receiving enough energy or chi, or maybe the spleen organ is bogged down by someone doing too many like raw foods or something. So we're assessing kind of where the problem could be coming from. So we're really assessing the roots rather than the branches of the syndromes.
I see. I got it. And then when it comes to the meridians or the channels themselves, some of them are named after those organ areas, like the gallbladder meridian. Uh, but then there's others like triple heater. So, uh, could you explain a little bit about channels or meridians?
Yeah, I mean, the channels are actually physical channels that go through our body. They follow anatomy. And the acupuncture points along the channels are, actual palpable points. It's not like there's this exterior energy beacon that's like running along our body. They're actually like part of our like flesh and blood and bones. So there's actual chi and blood moving through these channels. And so what
So,
we're doing with acupuncture is if we assess maybe there's a blockage around the elbow on this particular channel, we can use acupuncture to release that.
so when you palpate an area of the body, what is that you're feeling when you feel either blocked chi or one of the points themselves? What is it that you're what do you sense with your palpations?
Yeah, it takes a lot of time to get
I
used
imagine.
to, but you actually will, as you're moving along the channel, you just kind of feel your finger almost sink into the point. And usually the patient will say, yeah, there it is, or they'll know right when you hit it. Um, and I mean, it depends on what's going on. If there's a lot of buildup in that area, I might actually feel that buildup. Or if there's a blood stagnation, I might actually feel it under the surface of the skin. If there's a lot of deficiency, sometimes you can really like press in and it actually will feel good to the patient because you're kind of filling out that deficiency.
Oh, that's a good way of thinking about it. Yeah, because some of the work that I do and in feeling different areas of the body, you can, as you get more accustomed to it, just like any other practice, you get better the more you do it. You get a sense of, oh, this is where muscles are pent up, let's say. This is where
Yeah.
there's, in your words, stagnation. There's not movement or circulation. And you can feel that compared to the tissue around it. It's kind of like what you're saying, isn't it? It's only a little bit different. You're looking for the soft patches. I'm looking for the rigid areas.
Yeah, and I would, with Chinese medicine, even go further into thinking, well, I think this person might have a maybe some dampness in their middle region, so I'm going to go to those channels along the stomach and actually press in. And if I'm right, there might be an accumulation. It would be uncomfortable for me to, poke inward. It's because there's already too much there. So that's going to dictate how I'm treating with the needles. Do I want to disperse that area and move things out of that area, or do I want to, put things into that area?
Okay, now I've got a more personal question because every time I get treated with acupuncture, and I've been doing it for decades now, I
Cool.
absolutely think that it's an integral part of my wellness routine and preventative maintenance, so to speak. And it's done wonders. And sometimes I just need it to reduce my stress too. But regardless of why I am, what the treatment is focusing on, I always fall asleep. I always just on the table or in the chair or wherever it is. It What is that all about? Why is obviously I'm relaxed and I want and I get to a point where I'm very relaxed, but what's going on?
I think I think it's really hard in our society for us to give ourselves permission just to relax completely. So I
Hmm.
think actually taking the time to get on the table and do something that we know is beneficial for ourselves is really giving ourselves that permission just to let go and sleep. I think a lot of people, I think most people probably don't sleep as much as they should. So a lot of times, whenever you're doing acupuncture, it's waking your body up to remember, oh, I'm actually tired. Or it's waking your body up to what it's actually experiencing rather than what you've kind of trained it to experience.
Now, I know of friends, colleagues, and whatnot who have gone to acupuncture and they have the complete opposite effect when they get needles. They lay on the table with their eyes wide open and they just stay waiting for the practitioner to come back in, but not in an impatient way. They just don't get to that state where they fall asleep. And I find that remarkable. But what can you give me a sense of why that might happen?
I think everyone is just completely different. I mean, I have patients like that. I have patients who fall asleep. I have some patients who do like a meditation on their earbuds or something. So I have a lot of, like, everyone kind of has their own way that they like to interact with the medicine. And I think that just highlights the individual nature of it.
Sure. So it's not disconcerting to walk into the room and find that your patient's just staring blankly up at the wall waiting for you.
No, I usually will ask into it just to make sure they're like having a good time.
And now, is there a specific a population, I would say, like, is there that you specialize in, or is it more general population? Are you dealing with older adults with chronic issues, or is it just across the board?
So I do general practice, so I actually see a lot of things across the board. I've worked with children, I work with a lot of elderly, a lot of, I rent my office through a counseling center, so I actually see a lot of referrals with them as well. So I work a lot with the kind of emotional imbalances. There are people who specialize, and I'm actually currently in a year-long course for integrative specialties and practitioner development. So right now we're doing kind of a deep dive into gastroenterology. I'm going to be working on learning about a lot of oncology, and so kind of always just educating in different areas and different fields and specialties to bring into my practice.
And do you network with specialists in those fields?
Um, I a little bit. I mean, I talk to experts or I talk to people's doctors sometimes if there's something strange, but um, I plan on probably reaching out more once I actually go through this course and, learn a little bit more about the specialties. Doing general practice, I haven't really done too many deep dives in any of these areas. That's why I'm doing this class to try and develop those skills.
I see. So within the state of Maryland, or better yet, the city of Baltimore, how how is acupuncture viewed? Is it integrated into the community quite well, or where is it? Where does it lie in the overall scheme of things?
I think it's pretty integrated at this point. I mean, I'm in network with all of the major insurance companies here. Medicare just started covering acupuncture for low back pain, so it's really on an upswing as far as that end of things go. But
Wonderful.
it's also pretty prominent in this area since the school is about 30 minutes away. There are a lot of experts in the area just from teaching at the school. So it's really kind of a hub area, in my opinion, for Chinese medicine.
But not oversaturated with the professionals that are there. There's enough practice
No,
for people.
I mean, there's a little bit of that, sure, but I think there's enough difference in practitioners and enough difference in patients that there's no really one master practitioner for everybody. Some people are going to gravitate towards one style of treatment, some will gravitate towards others. So I think there's enough need for it amongst the communities that it doesn't really become too much of a problem.
And are there many acupuncturists in the similar environment as yourself where you have professionals within sharing the same office space or commercial space and you have this cross referral networking going on?
Yeah, there is a lot of that. There's a lot of, wellness collectives, people. I have a friend of mine is going to start doing massage with me through my practice. Um, Acupuncturists, I tend to refer out to other acupuncturists I know who specialize in one thing. My personal acupuncturist specializes in infertility and gynecology. So if I have really complex cases, I'll send them over to her. And so there's a lot of that kind of thing going on. If I know someone's particularly good at sports medicine or certain types of injuries, I'll send people.
Is there anything working against the integration of acupuncture in our culture now?
Not that I can really see. I think it's really I mean, I think education about it is probably um the biggest block because people just don't know about it. They hear chi and think of we're just talking about this like ethereal energy force from space or something. I don't know. So I think just a lack of awareness of it. And I have patients, a lot of times people seek me out after they've tried everything, been to multiple specialists, and just can't figure out what's wrong. And then they come in and they're like, wow, I didn't know acupuncture could do this, or I didn't know Chinese medicine even like thought about that or something. So I think I think as kind of a new age of medicine starts to develop, younger practitioners start to move more into the field of Western medicine. I think there's going to be more integration and more referral because I have a lot of patients who actually seek me out because their physicians recommended acupuncture.
That's refreshing. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
And it, with the insurance companies covering care and the medical profession recognizing the efficacy of the approach and referring others, yeah, it's a wonderful time, I think, to be in your practice.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who are like kind of scholars or professors in the field are doing a good job too, because they're actually going to these medical colleges and doing lectures and just kind of educating the new wave of medical students about what we're doing versus just saying what it can do. It's actually talking about the systems that are in place that we're utilizing.
And with acupuncture, it lends itself to taking sick care, which we call health care, and putting it into more like wellness care, where we're not necessarily always treating symptoms, but we're working on building up the systems within an individual and in a community, balancing things out. And rather than just constantly trying to, oh, pump up the pharmaceutical corporation's bottom line, so to speak. So do you see, that's the other thing that I'm curious about with the power and the reach of pharmaceutical companies. Do you see that in them infusing themselves into acupuncture when it comes to supplements or other tools of TCM? Are you noticing that big pharma is starting to work their way into your practice?
No, I haven't really seen much of that myself. I think there's kind of, I think because it has such a stronghold on Western medicine, um, I think there's kind of a fear element sometimes whenever we're talking about Chinese herbs, or like if I'm recommending a formula to somebody, there could be a little bit of an apprehension of how will this interact. I mean, we're trained and to know how things interact with different drugs and stuff, but I think there's such an emphasis on kind of the pharma culture in the US that it's hard for people to kind of see Chinese herbal medicine as something that can be really integrative in their life rather than something completely alternative.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just curious where the road is being paved right now on into the future. Well, this has been a really nice time discovering more about traditional Chinese medicine. Let's just say that there's a listening audience in the Baltimore area. I'd love to know how they can seek your services and what they should do.
Yeah, you can visit windgatewellness.com, um, or just give me a call. You can Google it. I'm right in the Mount Vernon neighborhood, so right by the Washington Monument.
Oh,
And it's very centralized in the city.
it's been a rather exciting time in your neighborhood recently, I guess. Yes. All right. More to the point that people need to see you, if nothing else, to just de-stress and balance themselves out. And obviously, the services you do are in person, but your website provides a good deal of information about not only the services you have, but uh, all the things that we've been talking about. So, are you belonging to a network of other TCM acupuncturists across the nation?
Oh, of course. I think even just being a professional kind of puts you in network with really anyone. But there are a lot of different groups on social media. There's a lot of different groups within kind of local politics or local community driven spaces.
Well, I'm just thinking also if somebody is in, say, Lubbock, Texas, and they're not familiar with the acupuncture clinics around, rather than simply going to their Yelp pages or whatever, if there is a reputable network of
Oh, yeah.
associates for referring.
Yeah, NCCAOM is once you're board certified through them, definitely has a full library of practitioners from across the whole country.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I'll make sure that information is in the description of the podcast on the page below. And again, Robert Prokop, I really want to thank you for coming on and contributing to the successful body and sharing a little bit about acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine. And I can only see things just improving as we go through this year. And the need for people for your services is obviously at a very nice level for you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. It was a great conversation.